The Puma Deviate Nitro 2. Is the hype about this shoe correct, or is this shoe a flop? Let's talk about it. So before we get into the video, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're ready to subscribe, watch the content. Thanks so much. I love you guys a lot. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Strava for all sorts of other updates. Links are in the description below. Without further ado, let's begin. Specs, wherever they're not conflicting with the whiteboard. And I'll just go off right off the rip. There is some deliberation about the exact height of the heel and forefoot based on some other metrics I've seen online, but the internet does seem to agree that 6 millimeters is the correct offset. We'll just get that off right as when you see these numbers, what to think about that. So anyways, let's backtrack a little bit and let's just get into the absolute state of daily trainers as to how I got to this shoe as something to test. So starting in, like 2018, 2019, I was working with Hoka and Nike products to just go run with those, particular shoes, and they were very good at the time. Once 2020 came around, like the best daily trainer of my life came around, which is the Pegasus 37, and then Nike products started falling off real bad at that point from some production issues, or just the product was no longer being tailored to my running style. And from there, I have branched out to, various things. I've tried Asics products, I've tried Adidas product, and now we find ourselves looking at Puma product because, the comment section just never seems to fail on these videos that I make, where recommendations come out. I do some research on some product that comes out as well. And there's a lot of consistency in things people end up, talking about. And one of the shoes that was recommended multiple times on this channel was, in fact, the Deviate Nitro 2. And it's so funny because as somebody who runs, I don't think of Puma as like the premier running shoe brand, despite the fact that you have to kind of backtrack in your history of running and track and field to remember that like guys like Usain Bolt and the Jamaican track and field teams were basically endorsed and sponsored by Puma. So with that in mind, it makes a lot more sense. But as somebody who's of Polish descent, right? I know the two biggest European brands. There might be more, but the only two I can think of right now is both Puma and Adidas, right? So it's just kind of funny thinking that hey, this Puma brand, this soccer slash street race shoe driver brand is also making what apparently appears to be a really good running shoe. So get all that intro spiel out of the way. Let's just get right into it. Specs of the shoe are that this is sitting at about 9.1 ounces, which sits at 262 grams on average. We do have a heel of about 32 millimeters precisely, and then we do have it at about 26 in the forefoot, giving it the 6 millimeter offset, and also not exactly the highest of stack heights, but something that looks a little bit more medium, comparatively speaking to a lot of the absolute, market of daily trainers in this case. Other things worth noting is that we do have two sets of foam on this shoe, two which are new to me. We have this one piece on the top following similar patterns of most of our daily trainers, where there's one that follows the forefoot area of the shoe, and then we have this heel pattern that kind of follows out this way. We have this Nitro Elite basically that runs the top, and then we have this standard nitro foam that kind of runs the heel area of the shoe. You can actually kind of see where it cuts off. It's actually really well built to see that it almost blends in just the way it does. So no color contrast on the foam to necessarily distinguish that. You just have to look for the creases in this case. Other things worth noting is, yes, this is technically a carbon plate shoe. I don't know if the plate itself is carbon fiber, but it is labeled as what? That's called a power plate. It's a power plate that's just smack dab in the middle of the shoe there. That would be probably using some kind of nylon plastic composite as a replacement, and then whatever the racing shoe equivalent for this shoe is probably going to be using the carbon compound. And again, the plate is running, I believe, the entire duration of the shoe, and it follows this S shape to give you that forefoot spring toe off that you would be looking for in this kind of case. In the uppers, we do also kind of follow a similar trend to a lot of shoes on the market, where we have this dual, style mesh where there's one pattern on the top and then there's a separate one on the inside to help with the lockdown of the shoe, but also keep the structure from taking any sort of damage from the elements or your own foot breaking the shoe in various places. And you can see by some of the reinforcement that's kind of placed around the shoe, whether it's this like power tape, for example, to help keep the arch of your foot kind of stable so it doesn't rip through this material, or we have some of the decals right here in the forefoot area to prevent your toes from kind of ripping through. So there's a couple of things working with the mesh that I like. We're going to get into some of my concerns as we get there, but first we'll go over everything, right? Now we've got this tongue again that seems to have a gusseted form, and it has a bit of like spongy foam texture to it, style I can also say, and I think the cut is okay. I think as time goes on it'll pull more as we kind of get through the shoe here, and then I think the shoelaces overall are of good length. I don't think they're too short or too long at this time. Again, just first impressions. We're going to see what happens as time goes on here. Now, let's see. I took the shoe on 2 runs as my kind of like test. I took it on a 5-mile outdoor run, and I took it on like a 1-mile treadmill just to, simulate both cases. And what I'll say at this time, here we go, drum roll, right, is that the deviation from Nike products has been a major success on this channel, right? You guys are pretty much on fire when it comes to picking some really good shoes to look for. So like the Boston 12 was an excellent daily trainer. The Boston 11 was one of the best that I had last year. Just the lifespan of the shoe sucked, right? So when you guys brought up the Puma Deviate Nitro as like, this is the shoe, let's see something for it. I took it on a run, and despite like some of my like current, I guess, like injuries or sore points on my, peroneal tendons or ankles, like the ride of the shoe is extremely smooth. That's like the first thing I noticed. It felt very streamlined. It wasn't the world's fastest ride I had, but the toe off, the cushioning of the inside of the shoe, including the foam response overall, whether it's like, the stability structure of it, the running of like trying to push a little bit quicker in it or just trying to keep a stable pace, like the shoe is working extremely well. It's not like, it's too soon to tell if it's like going to be in my top 5 daily trainers since 2020. But as of like the first run, there's like a lot of really good things going on with this shoe. One of the things I do like is the lock. So in this case, I wasn't real tight about the shoe. I guess we could tighten it as we go later on with the shoe. But like in the heel area, despite not being extremely tight in the shoe, it was comfortable enough where there wasn't any sort of like blistering or rubbing in this like heel collar lip area, because there's a lot of cushioning just to keep it as daily trainer as possible, keep it comfortable for those longer runs if you so choose to use it for that. The other things I would like to give kind of a shout out to is also the fit of the toe box. I've seen in like some other reviews that it gets tight in this area. Personally, it doesn't seem like it gets really tight. I think if you're like a Nike 9 or 8.5, like I think this is true to size from that metric. I would also probably say the same thing about like the Adidas Boston platform. Same kind of sizing, nothing too unusual with that as of this time. And yeah, those are like some of the big things I noticed. And again, another thing I do look for is if I experience any sort of like arch soreness or kind of like that headache feeling, which I guess is associated with plantar fasciitis, which is strange because I don't really do a whole lot of heel striking. Nevertheless, there's a sensation in the arch I'll experience in some of my feet sometimes. And the best way for me to replicate or duplicate that feeling in shoes is to run on a treadmill, okay? Because of just how consistent that kind of strike is in a straight pattern. And I wasn't able to get that plantar fasciitis feeling in this shoe, which is a huge plus, by the way. So that's something I enjoyed as well. And then the consistency of pace was really nice in this shoe. So when I was running yesterday through, snow, wet terrain, and just knowing that I'm like a 3:10 marathon, PR runner, so that means like 7:15 is my marathon race pace, then you have a 10K at like, sub 6:10 or whatever. I was able to comfortably hold about 7:41 pace in this shoe for about 5 miles. And that was like, hills, traffic, and all those other conditions just kind of all put together, and snow and ice and all that. So the shoe will be consistent if you're consistent at whatever pace you're choosing. So that's been a big plus, is whether the shoe will drive with you if you so choose for it to do so. And then probably the last thing I guess we should probably talk about is the cons of the shoe. I guess, well, we could also take a look at the bottoms of the shoe. That's probably usually where we start with on this channel, but I guess we kind of skipped it just to get right into the history of why we're looking at Puma shoes, right? So that's the shoe after about 6 miles. And this was something that was discussed also, I think, at length on other channels I've watched, including Michael Coe's channel, is that like there's a lot of traction on this shoe. To me, this seems like kind of standard. It's just the pattern looks kind of traction-y. But overall, I think this is like a pretty okay looking road running and even like semi-trail looking, outsole to the shoe. Like the only parts of concern that I would be watching out for, again, for me, is like in this toe box area up here. In the case of this particular shoe, I want to see how this foam wears out just over time from like impact and whatnot. And then I think that's going to be my biggest concerns. I'd like to see how quickly I can burn these lugs, particularly on my left foot. But yeah, at this time, like the only real wear areas are just still on the outsides of the shoes, which is kind of expected. But as time goes on, we'll see how quickly we can burn into the Nitro Elite and the Nitro foams as we kind of go along. So last thing I wanted to discuss was the cons, or things that I'm just looking out for at this time. So they might not necessarily be bad. Maybe it's just a case of conditions or weather or whatever I'm running in. But without further ado, yeah, let's talk about it. Water and moisture trapping or entrapment in the shoe. 2 places. One, after my run yesterday, the shoe was really damp. And my thought here was that some of the moisture from maybe running in the snow, maybe sweat from my feet, got trapped in the shoe and didn't really have a way to escape. So that's kind of one big problem if you're running either like when it's raining, it's the winter, or it's a really hot, moist summer day, and all that humidity is like built up in your feet and it just kind of stuck in the shoe and you get like spongy shoes from that, right? That's going to add a lot of additional weight that you might not want. And that may have occurred yesterday. So again, too soon to tell. I'm going to replicate it a couple of times to see if this is one of the things that happens. And then again, on the note of water, moisture, but also, I guess, material used, I'm going to be monitoring the tongue of this shoe because again, this like spongy, gusseted tongue is interesting. It does have like 2 layers to it, and the sponging in between is probably a nice fit to kind of give you some support from the shoelaces. But my concern is that A, it is absorbing a little bit of moisture, which I noticed while running, and then 2, this could also cause some issues with the lock of the shoe in the top area, just in, I guess, as a sacrifice from having the shoelaces drilling into like the top of your foot. You might have some looseness here in the top, which could be something of concern moving forward. Those are the only cons I have as of this time, or things I'm going to monitor and we'll kind of touch back on as time goes on. But yeah, first impressions, I think the opinions overall for the shoe do stand that this is a really, really good daily trainer that, again, is using carbon plate technology, is not of Nike or, Hoka branding, kind of more, in my opinion, an uncommon running brand, but more of like a very common sports brand across the globe. I like the colorways of the shoe. I like the feel of the foam on the shoe that has a nostalgic feeling to previous shoes I've run in with that kind of foam, almost instability, but also great kickoff that is provided with this style of shoe. And I am excited to see how far we can take this thing. And yeah, there'll be more to report on it. But yeah, I like this thing right now, and I'm going to stick with it. So we'll see what happens, I guess. So if you agree or disagree with the assessment, let me know in the comments below. If you got a pair, let me know your experience, what to expect, at what mileage points and whatnot. But I think we'll leave the review right here. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.